Welcome back to Tech Vets, the podcast, and today we're joined by Robin Cleave, who is with NatWest as their release train manager for ProPay. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Now, can you tell us what a release train manager is? Because I'm guessing you don't work with railroads.
Not actual trains, no. Okay, so people always have this idea in their mind of they use banks, they have credit cards, debit cards, they tap, they put chip and pin, they do all that sort of stuff. But they probably never really give much thought to the infrastructure that sits behind it. What banks do, depending on whether you're a sort of an older guard bank like NatWest, Barclays, HSBC, whoever, everyone's got different types of architecture that sit behind the actual payments process itself. And all of them will have some sort of payments processing engine that will cover all types of payments, whether it be CHAPS, BACS, SWIFT type messages, Target2, and you don't need to know what those are specifically. It's more the fact that there are different types of payments out there. Like computers, every computer, phone, any type of electronics really that has software built into it will have a software roadmap in which new functionality, new features, policy, governance, whatever goes into it, there's a roadmap of what needs to be achieved by when. So a release train manager is the person that essentially interacts with all other stakeholders in order to get your product roadmap on time, on budget, and getting everybody talking to each other at the right time. The old analogy of being, company sergeant major, getting people in the right place at the right time with the right equipment, knowing what they're supposed to be doing and how they're supposed to achieve it. So, for lack of a better analogy, I am a fixer. I get people in the right place, the right time, with the right equipment in order to fix the problem.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like a huge remit that you cover.
It's interesting because I genuinely put like so many other people probably had never put any thought to how banking infrastructure works. To be perfectly honest, I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when I first accepted the job. Payments architecture and payments landscape, payments technology is such a complicated beast where it's one of those things that no one person could know everything. So to have tried to learn everything would have just been folly. But what I have done and what I've done in sort of previous parts of my life is not be an expert in one thing, but to be an expert in experts. So knowing who the right people to talk to in order to solve X will then enable Y. So say, for instance, you needed to speak to a quality assurance analyst who's done testing on a certain part of the code you're about to deploy. Firstly, you need to know who the person is, but you also need to know who they would interact with in terms of infrastructure, other types of testing, because there are different types of testing. I won't go into that because it's very boring. So I need to know who they are and then who they would interact with and then what the outcome would need to be, and then let the experts do their thing and then just make sure at the end of it, everybody's in the right place, right kit, right time.
How have you ended up where you are? It sounds like you must have a vast amount of experience to have found yourself in this role.
No, in fact, as far from it as it could probably be. If I'm being completely honest, it started as a conversation at a party when I was looking at crashing out of the Marines pretty quickly. And I'll probably get into this later, but I was on a medical trajectory out of the Corps, and I had absolutely no idea what I was doing, what I was going to do. I just moved house, I just had a baby, it was a pretty chaotic time. But I ended up speaking to a guy who said, have you ever thought about working as a release train manager? Obviously, like most of the people, you'd say, I don't like trains. He then kind of explained what it was. And in my mind, I had project management, which is something that I'd already put a little bit of thought to. Project management is kind of the sort of thing that you can kind of just walk into, and you don't need any sort of technical knowledge of stuff, as long as you can put pieces together and be able to say, right, okay, this is the outcome we are desiring. Let's break it all down into its component parts, get a delivery pipeline of when stuff needs to be in place and who do you need, that sort of stuff. So I'd already thought about project management. What I hadn't quite taken into account was payments technology. And it was a baptism of fire, I would say, because it is just so complicated. What I've said to people before, and I'd said it in the Forces Employment Charity event that we did at Bank of New York Mellon, was you don't really need to know a lot before you start doing what you're doing. What you need is the ability to adapt incredibly quickly, which most areas of the military will teach you. You need to have confidence. You'll get that from the military, or most people would. You need to be able to deliver information to people at timely intervals. You can look at the orders process for that, and the same goes for getting people in the right place, right kit, right time, the orders process. So the way I approached it when I first started was, how would I have done this back in the Corps? I've been asked to do X. Look at it as a set of orders. What's your first part of the set of orders, other than doing the sort of the 7-question estimate, is prelims. So you go through that prelims checklist of who do you need there. What's the you wouldn't be going to like, what's the weather? Because I'm sitting in an office, but those sort of overarching headings of the orders process is actually one way that I think I've succeeded in an area that I had absolutely no technical knowledge in, because I had a framework in place already to be able to at least make a damn good go of it before I started having to reach out to other people going, what the hell does that mean? So yeah.
So who was it that you were at a party? This is it sounds bonkers. You were at a party and you got talking to someone who worked in as a release train manager in that field.
Yeah, kind of. It just he was a friend of a friend. I'd explained my situation to him, and he kind of looked at me and just went, "Yeah, we could probably use someone like you." He'd known me previously and had known the sort of stuff I'd done back in the Marines, all the way from, operations in various parts of the world, different types of roles as well, from being a door gunner to being cold weather survival down in the Antarctic, to flying drones, to being an infantry section commander. So that broad spectrum of roles showed adaptability, being able to learn at pace, being able to interact with people in a way that, and this is something that I have definitely done since I've been at the bank, is dumbing things down so people can understand what the hell is going on. So many people will speak in TRAs, three-letter acronyms. Why would you speak in a three-letter acronym when so many people on that call might have absolutely no idea what you're talking about? So something that I've used a lot, and I think should be made standard, is just imagine I'm your mother and you're trying to show me how to use a new piece of software on your phone or something like that, because she's not going to know what she's doing. And I do it on a weekly basis. She'll ring me up and go, I don't know what this means. I don't even know what you're looking at. Right, explain the problem to me. And then just explaining something as if you're explaining it to a sort of a 12-year-old or your mother-in-law or whoever it might be. And that will then make other people understand that not everybody knows what they're talking about. They're the expert in their thing, but to assume, most other people would assume you know what they're talking about, and we don't.
That's a really good point. And do you think, was the person that you spoke to at that party, were they ex-military themselves?
No, absolutely nothing to do with it. No part of their family had done either. But it was a case where he had known of me, and his friend whose party it was also, he's Army. So he's had interactions with us before, in not in a professional sense, but anecdotally. Obviously hearing some of the things we get up to, or had got up to. And he'd kept a sort of a keen interest in how our careers had progressed and all that sort of good stuff. But he'd had no interactions with the military other than from a sort of a personal, anecdotal level.
Wow, that's kind of testament to the power of networking, but also to the reputation of Royal Marines. And I don't feel out of place saying that, because there are so many Royal Marines that I've spoken to through tech vets who have just gone from strength to strength in the tech world when they've got out, and it almost seems disproportionate to the other services in my view, but I can't quantify that at all. What did you have to do any upskilling or training to do your current job, or did you just learn on the job?
So I applied for the job with no formal qualifications whatsoever. And so the way that I went about it was, okay, this is the job role. This is the blurb in the sort of the advertising on the website, and just picking out key points that they are looking for, and then just going on to forums like, as if you've never heard of Reddit before, Reddit's a great forum for literally anything on the planet. You could have very niche interests, we'll call them, and there'll be a forum on it. So I went out and went through YouTube, Reddit, other parts of the internet, and just said, what would I need to know as a release train manager in payments technology in general, you then start collating a list of all the things that they do, how they do them, the qualifications that you'd need. And I then just started making lists of stuff in some sort of bucket per item. So training, what do I need for training? And there is actually a Scaled Agile Release Train Managers course. And then, you know, the interview questions, what types of things would I be asked as a release train manager, and then trying to apply that to what they're looking for, because obviously interview questions can be very generic, trying to make that fit within the interview. But when you've only got the experiences of what you've got from the military, being able to translate your experiences into how you would make that work as a release train manager for a bank is also something that you really need to put a lot of thought into. So, for instance, you're working in an ops room somewhere, and you're dealing with officers that are in, you know, targeting, or you're in there's sort of junior NCOs that are in the intelligence side of things. You've got a strategic effect that you're trying to hit, and that's, you know, the targeting or successful resolution of a mission, whether it be deliberate action or whatever. But people in the civilian world don't have any understanding of what that means. What you're actually doing is you're engaging with key stakeholders on a multifaceted project in order to achieve a strategic outcome. It's just in the language.
That's phenomenal. And when you say you had no formal qualifications, what did you have on your CV that you went in there with?
Good question, actually. I didn't think about that before we start this, but I'm just trying to remember. I had a good opening paragraph saying used to thriving in high pressure environments, key leadership engagement with stakeholders, cleared to a high government standard, yada yada yada. And then in all of my sort of outcomes, i.e. training, operational, and like engagement side of things, I just listed all of my examples and how I'd achieved certain things. In my qualifications things, I've got A levels, and I can't even remember what it's called. It's called a latenantship that you get after the Royal Marines Junior Command course. Is the only formal education, qualifications I've got or had until I did the interview, was successful at the interview, and then I told my then boss, well, I better go and do the course now. And he was like, okay, yeah, great. And then when I got back to him about 3-4 weeks later and said, I've done the course, is there anything else you want? He there was this weird silence at the end of the phone. He was like, really? Like, yeah. You've done the course? Yes. And then there's me thinking, why is that weird? And he explained to me that even though he'd offered me the job, he's not used to people being proactive and going out and doing the needful to be able to, you know, hit the ground running. And that's one thing that I know that so many people in the military just deliver in spades, is being proactive and just thinking about something and going, well, what would I need to do in order to achieve this? And then going and doing it. without any sort of prod or push or sort of direction. And it's probably quite a proud moment of my sort of recent life when he was just like, I'm actually genuinely impressed by what you've done. I was like, at the time, I was like, I never even considered not doing it. Why would I turn up to a job when I didn't even know what it was, let alone how to do it? So, excuse me. And yeah, it was just for me. What he said was strange and alien to say. I can't believe you've actually gone and done it, because I would never have considered not doing it. And I know other people listening to this would probably be exactly the same, thinking it's completely mental, not being prepared to go into a new job where you have absolutely no idea what you're going to be doing.
It is worrying, isn't it, when you think about how shocked people are at how proactive military people are, and the standard that they expect is so low compared to the standard that military people set for themselves and is expected of them. Yeah.
And as I've developed in this career, I'm now finding that people are coming to me over so many other people that might technically be better placed to deal with whatever the problem is, because, and there are other Marines in NatWest, there's other Army, RAF, and they're in a similar situation where we just deliver and quickly. And it's just, and sometimes it's just a simple case. They'll have asked me, "Oh, I'm not quite sure where to find X," and because I've spent time networking within the organisation and doing a little bit of my own research on the side, this, that, and then, they go, "Oh, actually, no, I do think I know where X is, or I know someone who would probably know." Mm-hmm. So you then send them a message, send this other person a message saying, "Do you know anything about?" And again, it's that proactive and being direct about something, saying, "I'm not sure whether you're the right person, but do you know X?" And they might say no, but they go, "But actually, I do remember speaking to someone who probably would." And then you kind of use that network of people in order to achieve. An example of that would have been, I can't even remember who the person was. Don't remember their name. I've only ever spoken to them once. They asked, "Would you be able to help us work out how the bank's carbon footprint is X percentage lower consistently between June last year and June this year?" And I was like, that is a very random question. So I then just reached out to a couple of people, did a quick Google as well of what happened in June last year, and it was when the interest rates went up. Bank of England put the interest rates up, so you can then work out that less available liquid money in people's pockets, less transactions happen, less stress on infrastructure, which means less heat, which means less air conditioning, which means lower electricity costs. And you're using less electricity as well. And we'd worked out that just by a simple sort of deduction, there was the decrease in air conditioning.
That's amazing that, and so random that they came to you, but you were able to support it. Oh my goodness!
Just very, and that's just an example of the sort of things you get asked.
How long have you been?
Like I say, it's not just me. Like as a network, I am part of the Armed Forces network. We get asked random things all the time.
And is that within NatWest, the Armed Forces Network?
Yeah. I'm actually the network lead for events in London, but it's kind of a fluid type of network where everyone is involved in everything, but we do have semi sort of specific roles. Mine being events, and engaging with other networks and within the bank. So obviously you got your rainbow networks, your environments networks, and there's loads of them. But yeah, like from a network perspective, I think the remit was originally, doing well for military, for sort of veterans and spouses of military personnel or whoever it might be. But I've seen a really great shift where, and I know I've definitely tried helping drive this, is we shouldn't be specific to just ex-military people or people with a connection to the military. One thing I've always said is make yourself indisposable and people will always come to you for help. And I think that's part of what that is extending your remit to anyone and everyone, making yourself indisposable, and then succeeding as a whole rather than multiple fragments of the same thing.
So how does with the Armed Forces Network within NatWest, how do you make sure that net spans more broadly than just veterans and service leavers and forces families?
A lot of word of mouth. In fact, most of it is word of mouth. But we do things like we host little networking breakfasts. We help with other networks, events and stuff, and things like that. We host external parties like Royal British Legion. We've done some work with Military Wives Choirs for London Poppy Day. There's loads of things that we do, but unlike other institutions where they've got a sort of a veterans pathway into services, it's kind of almost like a graduate scheme, I guess you could call it. We don't do that specifically, but what we do is we're proactive in our sort of recruitment and things like that, and we offer help and guidance to both parties. So from a organizational side of things, when we get a CV come in and they say they're ex-forces, we help the person reading that CV interpret what is on it, because something I know it's not taught very well, and I think it's something they should teach you in school, is how to write a CV in a way that people can understand what you're saying and being able to relate your experience into a sort of a common language. So you could have been hoofing section commander in I don't know, wherever you were in the world. No one on the other side of the phone is going to understand what that means. So being a team leader, being responsible for the administration and conduct of multiple team members, and I sort of kind of alluded to it earlier, getting the person on the other side of the phone to understand that is really important. So, and then obviously the engagement with the other side, with the actual applicant, these are the sort of things that you'd need to look into, look for, prepare for if you were successful in getting to interview.
That's really good advice. And I think it's one of the services that TechVets offers is the CV review service. But I think as more companies grow and recognise the value of ex-military, building those networks is invaluable. And I guess with NatWest doing it, other companies are more likely to follow suit, because I think we've seen it with Google, we've seen it with Cognizant, that companies are cottoning on to these people are really good and they're worth retaining. Going back to your career with the Royal Marines, you mentioned an injury. Can you talk me through kind of that, what led to the injury, or kind of how it changed? Were you in the Royal Marines for life? Was that your vision?
So I joined in 2007 as a recruit. Spent a number of years up in what is now 4-3 Commando. Had a number of physical injuries up there. Dislocated hip. Knocks and bumps and scrapes and whatever, what have you. I was then on HMS Endurance, the last HMS Endurance, and that's actually the first time I met my immortality, where we were about 6 or 7 of us were down in the engine room when it was sinking. All the lights went out. We were up to our necks in water. And then, things sort of went a little bit more south from there, and we all eventually made it out. But moving on to Optelic as a door gunner, Somalia for counter-piracy, counter-narcotics, down to South America doing counter-narcotics and teaching. East and West Africa doing the same sort of thing. All the way through to what I was doing towards the end of my career in sort of more specialist units, and the work and the type of work I was doing. Something, whatever it was, happened in my mind. I started becoming incredibly fatigued, unable to sleep, terrible dreams. And eventually it kind of led to a bit of a sort of psychotic break. Basically just detached from reality, to the point where I was had to be sort of fairly heavily medicated, and unable to do my job, at which point it was, unfortunately, you've had a quite a long and interesting career, but we can't employ you anymore. So it's time to go. So that's kind of the pathway that led to where I am now. I had a lot of help, which is great. And for those people that are sitting out there struggling, help is there. You just have to ask for it. But when you're in that situation and you don't see a way out, it can be incredibly lonely. And when you do eventually snap, you just have to have the strength in character and strength in mind to put your hand up and say it's not okay. So I've actually forgotten where I was going with this now.
No, oh my gosh, you've been so honest, and I think it's something that people aren't as open and honest, and the more people that are, make such a difference to people who might be listening to this and going through something similar and thinking, I'm broken, and where do I go and where's the light? But actually, you're a perfect example of overcoming that and being okay, and that things do work out.
The problem with the military is, and it is getting better, but it's a place where weakness or signs of weakness puts you in a really difficult position where you can just be devoured. And it really does depend where you work, but I know the Marines can be a difficult place for. It's a male-dominated environment. You've got a lot of like really big characters, really big sort of big emotional activities going on, like going to war, doing whatever it is you're doing. And for you to then turn around and say, well, actually, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure where my head is at mentally. It's a scary thing to admit to a group of people that you are supposed to be in sort of cahoots with and show the same level of I'm awesome. I'm an apex warrior, yada yada yada. So being able to admit that sort of thing in that environment is incredibly difficult. And there's some of us that have done more than others. There are others that haven't done as much as they'd want to, whether that be your sort of campaigning or proper war fighting or whatever it is. Doesn't really matter, but everyone is different, and the admission and the fear of being devoured by who you thought were your peers is a scary one.
How did you? You mentioned that there's help out there for people who are listening. Where would you signpost them to? Because you clearly put your hand in the air and said you needed help, and you got the help that you needed. But for people who may be in that situation now, where would you direct them?
So I never thought about going down the charity route until much later. But the exact way it happened with me was I was in a point where I was completely so mentally and physically fatigued by just complete insomnia. And if I ever did fall asleep, the dreams were so vivid and real and scary, and almost, that's like I said earlier, that sort of the inability to distinguish between the dream world and reality. I went to the sick bay and I booked a doctor's appointment, and doctor's name was Marcus, and he kind of said, "What can I do for you, Corporal Cleave?" And I was like, I just looked at him, I was like, I don't know. And that I think he could just see it in my eyes. And that's how the ball started rolling for me. And then we did start the charity engagement stuff where, I needed some private medical assessments done because the NHS wouldn't have been quick enough. So we went down the Royal Marines charity route. Royal Marines Association, they paid for studies to be done, medication, all that sort of stuff. But that simple act of just going in and saying, I don't know, was how it started.
And going through, so you clearly then had treatments, and what was the timescale between kind of walking into the med centre and having that conversation to being in a position to go for the job at NatWest?
I can't remember, to be perfectly honest. I think I seem to remember doing the interview in a sort of I did it in my room in the block. I had shirt and tie on top, and my just my sort of combat trousers and boots on underneath, because I had like an hour spare and then had to go back to work again. Probably don't know whether I should admit that or not. But I think it was about 12 months.
Wow,
something like that.
That's phenomenal. And
but I did end up in the Naval Service Recovery Centre, Hasler, who, in my mind, is one of the main reasons I'm still here. So the work they do is amazing.
Gosh, and that's, I think, kind of, if you look back at the individual you were into the med centre to where you are today, what would you say to yourself if you could go back and talk to that younger version of you?
Why didn't you do it sooner? Why did you put up with it for so long? And then I don't know whether it's the case whether if I'd have sought help sooner, I probably wouldn't have completely broken. Speculation. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, but also well done for actually putting your hand up and showing your vulnerability, because it's only when people see it that they can actually understand that you need help.
And what year did you join NatWest, and how long have you been there?
I started this job in my terminal leave last year, so that was March last year.
Okay, March. So you've had a huge roller coaster in the last 2 years of just, when you look back, you must just think, oh my gosh, this has been life-changing in so many ways.
Child, house move, new job. Well, there's the three main things anyway. It's been a bit of but again, knowing what I know now and that ability to put my hand up when I was struggling when I first got here, all the mechanisms that were in place here to help, I had no problem putting my hand up and saying, listen, I'm struggling here because I've got this much to learn with this much time. The maths doesn't add up here. Like, this is my first what I would call real job, and I don't know how to do a real job yet. I need some sort of guidance to help me work out how I prioritize things in order to achieve the most in the least amount of time. And again, that was there and it was readily available. You just got to ask for it.
And do you think that's one of the good things about working in the commercial sector? Have you felt like, not your chain of command, but your one up, your two up HR department have had a different style to what you would have expected in the military?
This is a weird one where you are expected to do a lot. You get worked hard, and my backlog. In my mind, I know that it's been nearly an hour, but in my mind, I was like, that's an hour out of my day. That even though I'm so happy to do this type of thing because I think it's really, really important, I've now got to try and do my best to make up that time when I know I've got so much to do. So you do get worked hard, but you're always, and it obviously does depend completely on your line management and stuff like that. I was incredibly lucky with mine, where I get on very well with my actual one up and two up. I'd explained to them my situation, and they were more than happy with that. And whenever I asked for something, they made sure that they did their best. And if they didn't know what to do, they would find someone who could. So, and I can't imagine too many other companies would be very different to that. Building a good rapport with your line management and I've got 18 sort of reports underneath me, and I do exactly the same for them. Whenever they need something, trying to do something as an individual when you can do it as, a shared problem shared is a problem halved. It's really important.
Yeah, and I think that's really reassuring for other people who might be thinking, when we go into when I go into the workplace, this new brave world, how am I going to be treated and how am I going to deal with people who, work and operate in a different system? So I think that insight is really important. And I'm really conscious that we are coming up on an hour now. I feel like I could probably speak to you for more. And I'm sure the listeners would like to hear more from you.
I've blocked out the whole hour, so we're good for.
That's perfect. And I think kind of bringing it back to Tech Vets, did you access any training support from Tech Vets, or do you use Discord at all?
I have to admit, until I did the Bank in New York Mellon event, I hadn't heard of it. And the only reason that is because I'd been using other pathways in which I got my support. You could spend as much time looking for who else is out there as you could do anything else. But I have obviously been, since that point, I've been through a lot of what you guys have done and how I can relate it to what I'm doing, and I've definitely pushed people in your direction since that event, because I think obviously what you're doing is so incredibly relevant and great for the industry. But yeah.
Okay. No, that's brilliant. And it's the same with a lot of people. They kind of discover Tech Vets a bit late, but actually the utility of it is being able to pass it on to the next generation that are coming up and out of the forces and getting them quickly trained and into roles.
I wish I'd heard of it sooner. That's what I would like to add to that, is I wish I'd heard of it sooner. But like so many things, you're probably so focused on this thing over here, your peripheral vision is not as open, because you're so focused on the thing at hand.
Yeah, and I guess that year of where you're kind of preparing to get out, or whatever that getting out phase looks like, there's a million other things to sort out, like house, family, children, schools, income, which is quite stressful and crazy. And for people that are listening, if they want to get in touch with you to ask you advice on, how you made the jump into becoming a release train manager, or any other aspects of your journey, what's the best way for them to find you?
LinkedIn is probably the best, I'd say. I do monitor it. I'm not that sort of person, and I see it quite a lot. And I don't know where these people find the time to put these huge posts with multiple different headings and emojis of like a little target or a person saluting. I don't have time to do that. But in sort of the direct messages and stuff like that, I've spoken to quite a lot of people, either that I've met along the way or have been referred to me by other people. So yeah, LinkedIn is probably best placed, because it all keeps it in one place for me.
Okay, that's perfect. And for listeners, we'll put a link to Robin's LinkedIn in the description of this podcast. And lastly, just thank you, Robin, so much for today. It's been an amazing insight into your journey. And when I say your journey, it's something that's bandied around a lot, but yours in particular is just pretty outstanding to hear. And thank you for being so honest and open, because actually, even if one person listens to this and it makes them go and ask for help in whatever way that is, whether that's medical, whether that's in the workplace, then it's had huge value. So thank you.
No, thank you for having me. And I would just like to add to that you've obviously been very kind in saying, great journey, but without the supporting cast along the way, that journey either would have been a million times as hard or would have had a different ending. So it's the people that you surround yourself with and that you lean on for support, advice, instruction. Sometimes you need to be slapped upside the head and just told to get on with something because it's the right thing for you to do. Build your support network as well as your professional network, because ultimately we're not in this life alone. The old adage of takes a village to raise a child takes more than one person being yourself to raise you.
That's a perfect way to end this podcast. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.